So there's this guy. His name is Jose, and he's really captivated the YouTube rebuild community because he bought a Hellcat that was involved in a fire. We're not talking about a little fire here. It looks like this car was sitting in a garage that caught on fire, and then the garage itself fell on the car, damaging the roof, the trunk lid. This thing is a complete disaster. But Jose spent near $5,000 on this car, and he claims he's going to rebuild it from the ground up. Now, a lot of people initially said, well, he's going to get a donor car and swap the good bits into it. But no, he is claiming he's going to take this fire-damaged car, really a fire-destroyed car, and completely rebuild it. Today I want to try and answer the question whether this rebuild project is feasible at all. And while doing so, I want to compare it to the 4 other Hellcat rebuilds that are going on here on YouTube. We'll grade each of these cars using a simple salvage scale, 1 being the worst grade, 10 being the best, basically analyzing the rebuildability of the car based on its purchase price at auction. We'll begin with Condor Builds 2015 Hellcat Challenger. Out of all the cars we'll see today, this one is the cheapest with a final bid price of $15,750. And I'm going to get all the sale data from the website autoauctions.io. It's an auction data site. You can check it out. The link in the description box below, as well as all the builds that I'll be covering today. Now, price and condition usually go hand in hand, and that seems to be the case on this car. This is probably the worst condition Hellcat we will see today. The front end damage is very significant. That front crash bar was pushed in down the center. You can see it making a V, which means that your front frame rails are highly compromised at this point. The only acceptable way in an insurance company's mind to fix frame rails is to completely replace them all the way from the firewall forward, which means removing the engine, removing the transmission, removing the interior, and drilling out these pieces, welding in brand new ones. That is very costly. That is probably why this car was totaled immediately. If that weren't bad enough, well, you got quarter panel damage on it on the rear side. In regards to repairing these frame rails, a lot of times you see on YouTube somebody sectioning the rail. So wherever the damaged portion is, they go back to that, they cut the rail off, and then they weld in a section of a replacement rail. And I think that this is an acceptable repair in certain cases, generally when the rail isn't damaged very far back. If it's only a few inches from the front bracket, I do think it is okay to repair a rail, but if it is closer to the firewall, I think you're better off going and doing things the right way and replacing it in its entirety. Otherwise, the rest of the car looks pretty good until we get inside and we see both of the airbags deployed. That dashboard airbag is a major nuisance. One of the things that turns me away from a lot of different salvage cars that I see is a dashboard airbag. In the case of a deployed dashboard airbag, a lot of times what you got to do is disassemble the entire dashboard, and a lot of times replace it because it punches a hole right where the airbag came out. Now, I love this specific car for parts because for $15,750, you've got an engine and transmission in it that would retail for $25,000 at least, just being sold by itself. However, as a rebuild project, it's gonna be pretty labor intensive. Considering the extensive front end damage, that quarter panel hit, and also that dashboard airbag deployed, even though this car came in as the cheapest, again, I think it's an amazing price. I'm gonna give it a salvage score on our salvage scale of 3 out of 10. This will require so much labor, so many parts, that it has the potential to get very expensive by the time you're done. Now let's move on to Alex Rebuilds with his 2016 Hellcat Challenger. This car also has pretty severe front end damage, but it also has rear end damage. Doesn't look too bad, but we can see the bumper is missing in the photos. Again, both the steering wheel and the dashboard airbag deployed, and with over 40,000 miles, this makes this the highest mileage car out of the bunch. It also has a manual transmission, which is the only manual out of the bunch here. Since it seems most of these Hellcats were produced with automatic transmissions, I would assume the manual would add a little bit of value to it. Besides the damage in the front and the rear, there's a little bit of damage that extended onto the passenger side door, and also it looks like the rocker panel is off a little bit. Now when it comes to painted surfaces like this door, you're already painting a lot of the car. You're painting pretty much from the fenders forward and the front. You're likely going to repaint that rear bumper, and now you've got a decent sized dent in the door, which likely means you're going to repaint that door. At this point, 3/4 of the car is in need of paint, so if you do things the right way, you're going to paint the entire car. That's exactly what Alex did, and it turned out amazing. But painting can be very costly, and of course painting an entire car versus painting a section of the car will increase your cost of rebuild. Considering the purchase price of this car, a little bit over $20,000, it's higher miles, the damage that was all over the car. One thing I didn't mention earlier, the roof was damaged on this car. It had to be completely replaced. There is a lot of work that Alex put in this car to make it right. Alex did an amazing job on this car, but before he began his repairs, I would give the car a salvage score of 3 out of 10. Next up, it's the Goonzquad Hellcat rebuild, but I want to remind everybody that the salvage scale is simply grading the cars that we're discussing here. It has nothing to do with the content creators, their channels, their personality, or anything about them. It is simply the cars. I've personally bought cars that would grade very low on this same scale. It just gives context to the builds we're discussing here, and I want to give credit to each and every one of these guys because I see their videos, I've seen their talents and their skills, and they bring different skills to the table that will assist them in their individual rebuild projects. A lot of times I'll look at something and say, I'm not interested in that, but somebody else that has worked on that same sort of issue a million times, well, that could be right up their wheelhouse, and that is the right car for them, and they're going to get out cheaper than maybe I would or somebody else would because they have that specific skill. I think it'd be fun if you guys participated in this as well. In the comment section below, using the salvage scale, I want you to let me know what you think about these Hellcat rebuild projects that we're going through right now. Remember, the salvage scale is based on the rebuildability of the car considering the price it's sold for at auction. Now let's move on to the 2017 Hellcat Challenger rebuilt by the Goonzquad. I'm fairly certain the Goonzquad have completed this car already. By the looks of it, you can see the front end damage compared to the last few that we looked at is not as nearly as extensive, even though the driver's side frame rail here did have to have some repair work done to it. The rest of it looks pretty decent. We can see the apron where the fender would sit is completely straight. Front end is actually really nice on this car. The damage extends past the front end. It looks like there's rear end damage. The real issue here is the quarter panel, which was pretty severely damaged, had to be cut out and replaced by Vtuned, the guy that does a lot of their framework. Vtuned is actually rebuilding a Hellcat. We're going to talk about his next. Again, in the interior of this car, we got those two same airbags deployed. Must be something about Hellcats and the way that Dodge programs their SRS system, but it seems like in most cases, both of these airbags are deploying. This is the newest Hellcat of the bunch and only 16,000 miles. You think it might sell considerably more than some of the other ones, but at $22,500, it's right in line with the prices we've been seeing. Now, the biggest issue I have with this car is the damage that is not just concentrated in the front end. Even though the front end damage isn't as severe as the other cars, there's still a lot of money worth of parts that needs to be replaced there. And then having to go and move to the quarter panel and cut a quarter panel out, that's fairly labor intensive. If you're not doing it yourself, a body shop charges a pretty good amount of money to do that, not to mention you got to go and get the part for them. Luckily, the Hellcat shares the same body as pretty much all the other Challengers down to the V6, so these are parts that are readily available. Price of $22,500 is very fair on this car considering its age. And if the car only came with that front end damage and even the deployed passenger airbag, I'd be giving it an 8 out of 10 on the rebuild scale. The issue is it's got that quarter panel and rear damage. Done right at the hands of most professional body men, this is where the project would probably go way over budget and cost more than the car would end up being worth when it was all said and done. Now, I know we do these projects for YouTube, but I still like the numbers to make sense when it's all said and done. And with the all-around damage, that deployed airbag, and the frame damage in the front end, I'm going to give this car a 4 out of 10 on the salvage scale. Our last Hellcat is the only Charger of the bunch, and it's being rebuilt by Vtuned at $24,600. It is the most expensive car out of all the ones we will look at today. And from the photos, it's not starting off very good. We see that the front corner wheel and suspension has been completely ripped off it. But in stark contrast to all the other cars, the front frame is as straight as it gets. It even looks like the cooling system is all intact. As we go around, the driver's side looks pretty much perfect. However, on the rear bumper and on the passenger side, there is various damage ranging from just the bumper skin all the way down to the doors. The interior has the side curtain airbag and the seat airbag that's been deployed. In my opinion, those are easier to deal with than a dashboard airbag. The engine bay is a silver lining in this car. It's pretty much perfect, and with only 12,000 miles on it, it's like new. Now, one of the things we don't see very well in these photos here, but Vtuned has made it very clear in the video, is that the roof was damaged on this car as well. He recently just got done cutting the entire roof off the car, and he made it look really easy. It was amazing to watch the process of the roof being removed because you can see the actual structure of the car like a skeleton with its skin being taken off. This car really appears to have a very sound frame with a lot of cosmetic damage. Now, Vtuned, being a body man, will make this job look super simple, but I could tell you it would be tedious trying to DIY this in your home garage. This is a tough one. It's got a lot of work, but arguably could be the most sound car car once rebuilt out of the entire group here. Unfortunately, I grade really hard when the damage isn't concentrated in one area, so I'm going to give Vtuned's car a 4 out of 10 on the salvage scale. Now it's time to round things back to the burnt Hellcat, Mr. Jose's car, better known as DIY Gang here on YouTube. Now when I think of DIY, I think of a suspension project or maybe a little paint touch-up. Maybe you take your stereo out of your car. I don't think of a car that has been completely burnt to the ground, but no worries, with the power of YouTube, some shop manuals, and some good tools, I think anybody can fix anything in their home garage, but maybe not a Hellcat that's been completely burnt to the ground. There's a lot of issues with this idea of rebuilding a completely burnt car. When metal's in a high heat environment like a fire, it warps. So the metal all around this car is going to be wavy. The shell that he is claiming to be able to rebuild here is just not going to be structurally or physically straight. Now, a friend of mine brought up a good argument. He said that you might hear somebody said, I had an uncle that did this to a 1957 Chevy. But the difference is the thickness of metal back then to now. The last time we were updated on Jose's car, it was sitting on a frame machine. Let's say that somehow he gets the structure of this car settled, which I can't see it happening in any realistic fashion. Yeah, you might be able to make it look okay, but up close, I don't think it will ever look right. And again, the structural integrity has been completely compromised by the heat. What else is left that's good in this car? If you were to give me this Hellcat that was completely burned, what I would do with it is I'd pull the engine and the transmission, and then I'd call up a salvage facility and tell them to take the rest of it away. Just, there's not a lot left. All the wiring harnesses, all of the modules in the car, they're completely ash at this point. It's unrealistic to go to a salvage yard even, find a Hellcat and buy every single component in there, because that's going to cost you more than a used or even probably a new one would cost at the Dodge dealership. Now, in my opinion, there's very few ways to successfully resurrect a car that's been completely burnt to the ground. But there's a guy who's done just that. His name is Rebuilder Guy. It's one of the channels I enjoy watching, and he had two Subaru WRXs, one that was completely burnt to the ground and another one that was in a flood that destroyed a lot of the car itself. He took two of these cars, combined them to one, and had one fully functioning WRX at the end of the day. As far as I understand, by the time he was done selling all the remaining parts afterward, it hardly cost him anything, especially because a car that's been burnt to the ground, a car that was in a really bad flood, they don't sell for a lot at auction. Rebuilder Guy is proof that you can resurrect a fire-damaged car, but you're going to do it in the body of another car. Again, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm having a hard time grasping the thought behind resurrecting this burnt shell here. All right, maybe I've gone a little bit off the rails here, and I'm trying to find one redeeming factor to this car whatsoever. I guess he pulled the engine. I think it had an okay compression test, and that kind of is to be expected with an engine like this. But again, going back to all the things that attach to the engine, how about all the pulleys on the front that are melted? How about all the wiring harnesses that connect to an engine? Wiring harnesses that at the dealership would cost you thousands of dollars from the parts department. If you could see where I'm going, it's not a good place. And again, this is not against Jose or any of his content or his channel. This is against the car itself and the idea of rebuilding a car that was completely engulfed in flames. I don't want to tell Jose to quit because he is convincing us that he's going to be able to finish this, but I see it taking a lot of time and way too much capital to ever be worth it. Usually when we rebuild a car, we're going to rebuild something that is either going to save us money considering current market values, or we're going to restore something that is impossible to get back, like an old vintage car, a very special edition limited production car. I've said it a couple times in this video alone. You can fix anything with money, and I know Jose could make this car one again. But is it worth it? Absolutely not. Not in my opinion. The last thing we have to do is give DIY Gang's Hellcat a salvage score. And I'm going to score it, even being the cheapest of the bunch, a 1 out of 10. There's no reason to rebuild this car the way it sits. Come in with that game plan, like getting the spare flood car. Find something else that you're going to be able to pull parts from and get it for cheap, and you're going to be able to take 2 cars or 3 cars and bring them into one and have a ton of parts left over to be able to sell and make your money back. I want to wish Jose good luck. Jose, honestly, I am very skeptical that you will finish this car in the way that you say you will finish it. However, That doesn't mean that I have been wrong several times before, so if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Guys, I appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed this format, let me know. If we can get to 10,000 likes on this video, I will do a similar one comparing all the Nissan GTR rebuilds that are going on here on YouTube. If you're not already following me on Instagram, you can get the latest scoop on all the project cars I'm working on right now. Instead of waiting for the content to come out here on YouTube, just go right here or click the link in the description box below. Guys, thank you so much for watching today, and I will catch you very soon. Gang, gang.